a plane departs from Dubai bound for India. It was a routine flight as the plane regularly traveled from Dubai to India and back. Everything was fine in the plane, all systems were functioning properly, and it safely reaches its destination without any issues. But due to a small mistake, or you could say, a minor miscalculation, the plane crashes just near its destination, and 158 people lost their lives in this accident. It's a heartbreaking story of Air India Express Flight 812 that shook people to the core. But how did this accident happen? Who is to blame for this? And was it possible to save this incident from happening? Let's find out in this video. Air India Express used to do a daily round trip. That means the flight came every day from Mangalore, India, to Dubai and then back to Mangalore. On May 22, 2010, a similar flight, Air India Express Flight 811, landed at Dubai's Dubai International Airport around 11 p.m. The flight was supposed to return to India under the name Express Flight 812. Therefore, the airport staff immediately began essential checks and refueling for the plane. During this time, 160 passengers boarded the plane to come to India. Speaking of the plane, Express Flight 812 used a special aircraft, the Boeing 737-800NG SFB. Indeed, it was one of the carefully selected planes from Boeing Company, specifically designed for landing on shorter runways. The particular plane used in Express Flight 812 had its inaugural flight on December 20, 2007. About a month later, it was handed over to Air India. This means the plane was almost 3 years old when it started flying for Express Flight 812.
Pilots boarding starting.
The responsibility for the flight, including the pilots and crew, rested with those who brought Express Flight 811 from India to Dubai. The captain of this flight was 55-year-old Zlatko Glisica, with 10,000 hours of flying experience and 7,500 hours of command experience. He had spent 2,440 hours specifically on the Boeing 737. Apart from Glisica, the command of first officer was in the hands of 40-year-old Harbinder Singh Ahluwalia, who had 3,620 hours of flying experience, including 3,319 hours specifically on Boeing 737. In addition to the pilots, there were 4 flight attendants on the plane. This means a total of 166 people were on board Express Flight 812. After completing all formalities at Dubai International Airport, the flight finally takes off towards Mangalore International Airport in India at 1:06 a.m. local time. While in India, it was already 2:30 a.m. The takeoff is very smooth, and the plane becomes stable as it enters the air. For the first hour and 40 minutes of the flight, there was no communication between the captain and first officer. This was because the captain, due to fatigue, fell asleep immediately after takeoff. Due to the captain falling asleep, First Officer Harbinder Singh had to handle all the necessary radio calls for the flight. Continuing in this manner, the flight reaches its waypoint, Igama, around 5:30 a.m. Here the ATC informs the first officer that they might need to take the ILS DME ARC approach for landing in Mangalore. ILS DME ARC approach is an instrument approach procedure used by pilots for landing in low visibility conditions. ILS stands for Instrument Landing System, which uses radio signals to provide precise guidance to the plane toward the runway. After that, DME, which stands for Distance Measuring Equipment, helps the pilot measure the distance. And lastly, ARC approach means guiding the plane in a curved path towards a point instead of going straight, allowing the aircraft to maintain its altitude and direction. So, the first officer copies this information from ATC and continues progressing, reaching around 5:45 a.m. in the morning. At this time, the flight is only 77 miles away from its destination, Mangalore Airport. And here, the ATC instructs Express Flight 812 to reduce its altitude to 7,000 feet. Actually, Mangalore International Airport is built on top of a hill and has 2 tabletop runways. For those who may not know, a tabletop runway is one that is built on an elevated surface or hill, and one or both ends drop off abruptly into a deep gorge. Landing a plane on such runways can be challenging, because even a small mistake can lead the plane to veer off the runway and fall into the gorge. In view of this danger, Air India Express had established a rule that only the captain would perform landing and takeoff at this airport. But this time, the captain had handed over full control to his co-pilot and was sleeping himself. Just to mention, Captain Zlatko Glisica had successfully landed 16 times at this airport, but First Officer Harbinder Singh had never landed here before. Indeed, he had played the role of a co-pilot in the 66 flights that involved arrivals and departures at this airport. Even when the first officer began reducing the altitude of the plane, there was no communication between him and the captain. At this point, the aircraft was at an altitude of 18,400 feet, and the distance from the airport was only 25 miles. At this point, the Mangalore Area Controller instructs the plane to descend to 2,900 feet, and the first officer promptly initiates the ILS DME arc approach by lowering the altitude. However, the challenge with this flight was that its altitude was significantly higher than necessary. At 5:52 a.m., for some unexpected reasons, the Mangalore Area Controller hands over the control of the flight to the ATC tower, and the tower controller instructs the plane to proceed using the ILS DME arc approach, circling around 10 nautical miles from the runway, heading east from west at a 240-degree angle. The first officer quickly copies the message, but along with it, he takes a deep yawn, indicating that he is fatigued from flying alone and not entirely alert. Now, it's the first time that Captain Zlatko realizes that his plane is flying at an unusually high altitude. At this time, the plane's altitude is 9,000 feet. Upon realizing this, Captain Zlatko quickly lowers the landing gear to bring the plane down swiftly. Along with that, he also extends the speed brakes to reduce the altitude of the plane as quickly as possible. At 6:03 a.m., the captain, after completing the landing checklist, directs the plane towards the runway for landing. At this point, the plane is only 2.5 miles away from the airport, and the altitude is 2,500 feet. The first officer shouts, warning the captain that the altitude is too high. However, the captain ignores them, turning off the autopilot and all other landing assisting systems. He attempts to manually reduce the altitude rapidly. The first officer suggests, to reduce altitude, we should go around and come back. However, the captain is not in the mood for such maneuvers. The co-pilot repeats the suggestion, but the captain remains adamant about landing the plane. In any case, the captain sets the descent rate of the plane to 4,000 feet per minute to catch the runway. Now, here the Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System, EGPWS, repeatedly issues warnings. Sink rate, pull up.
Pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
This warning means that the plane is descending too rapidly. Stop this or it might collide with the ground, leading to a crash. However, the captain doesn't pay much attention to this warning either. At this moment, a question comes from the ATC tower asking if the pilots have established the ILS approach. Even though the captain had turned off all such assisting systems, he asserts to the first officer with confidence that they are proceeding with the ILS approach. Upon this, the tower controller grants landing clearance to the plane. However, the truth was that the plane's altitude was still quite high for landing. Despite the warnings from the EGPWS, the first officer suggesting go-arounds, and other factors, the captain brings the plane close to the runway to land. Disregarding them. Due to the excessive altitude, the plane touches down much farther from the intended threshold, landing on the runway approximately 5,200 feet beyond the threshold. With only 2,800 feet of runway left for the plane to stop, and considering its higher than normal speed, the situation becomes critical. Captain activates the thrust reversers as soon as the plane touches down. However, seeing that the plane's speed wasn't decreasing, only 6 seconds after applying the brakes, the captain attempts to take off again. But it was too late till then. The plane proceeds to cross the runway, encountering a 60-meter strip and a 90-meter safety area along its path. However, surpassing all these, it ultimately crashes into a deep gorge. The rescue team arrives at the scene, initiating the rescue operation. Unfortunately, out of the 166 people on the plane, only 8 managed to survive. Teams from the Airports Authority of India, DGCA, and Boeing officials arrive at the crash site, initiating the investigation. In this investigation, the NTSB from the United States also provides assistance. Besides, the Indian government appoints a court of inquiry to delve into the matter. But in every investigation, it becomes evident that the accident occurred due to the captain's mistake, his insistence on landing, and downplaying the circumstances. He neither listened to his co-pilot nor took the EGPWS warnings seriously. Despite having a decent rest period before the flight, the captain slept for an extended duration after takeoff. It's possible that he experienced sleep inertia, affecting his ability to make sound decisions after waking up from sleep. Additionally, the unavailability of the Mangalore Area Control Radar that day also contributed significantly to the incident, as it led to a delayed message for the plane to reduce its altitude. Indeed, attributing the incident solely to this factor wouldn't be entirely accurate. Do share your views in the comment. Who do you think it's to blame for this wild incident? If Captain would have listened to his co-pilot, was there a possibility that this accident might have been avoided? This is it for the video. See you soon with yet another interesting story. Till then, goodbye and take care. If you liked our video, please encourage us by clicking on the subscribe button to see more such new videos. We are grateful to you for your kind cooperation.